The door of my office opened before my assistant could even announce him, and every plan I had for that afternoon disappeared in an instant. 3 men walked in like they owned the building. 2 of them stood near the entrance, arms crossed, watching the room like it might attack them. The 3rd man walked straight to my desk and sat down without being asked. I am Naomi Bellamy, and I run Lumen Match, a matchmaking agency that mixes an intelligent compatibility system with my own years of reading people. I have matched executives, doctors, even a senator once. I do not scare easily, but something about this man made the air in my office feel thinner. He wore a dark gray suit that fit him too well to be anything but tailored. His jaw was sharp, his eyes were sharper, and he looked at me like he already knew how this meeting would end. I need a wife, he said. No greeting, no small talk. Most people start with their name, I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was doing something strange. Adrian Cross, he said. You already know who I am, Miss Bellamy. Everyone in this city does. He was right. I had heard the name whispered in rooms where people thought I could not hear them. Adrian Cross ran half the shipping routes that came through the harbor, and rumor said he ran a great deal more than that. Men like him did not usually need a matchmaker. Men like him usually had women lined up outside their door, hoping for a single glance. Why come to me? I asked. Because I need this done properly, he said, within 30 days. 30 days is not how this works. A match is not a delivery you can schedule. Everything can be scheduled if the right person is running it, he said, and for the first time, something like the edge of a smile touched his mouth. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man used to getting what he wants. I should have said no. I should have stood up, thanked him for his time, and walked him to the door myself. That is what the rule book taught me on my very first day running this agency. Never take a client who feels more dangerous than the loneliness he is trying to solve. Adrian Cross felt like a storm walking on 2 legs, the kind of storm that ruins everything it touches, no matter how calm it looks from a distance. Instead, I found myself opening his file on my tablet, because curiosity has always been my weakness, and this man was the most interesting problem that had ever walked into my office. 6 years of matching people had taught me to spot patterns quickly, the nervous laugh of someone hiding a secret, the too eager smile of someone desperate not to be alone. Adrian Cross showed none of these signs. He sat perfectly still, hands folded, watching me the way a man watches a door he is not sure will open. Sit still, I told him. I need a full reading. Family background, daily habits, what you actually want from a partner, not what you think you should want. He answered every question directly, without hesitation, like he had rehearsed this moment long before he ever stepped through my door. He told me about his mother, who died when he was young. He told me about the empire he inherited before he was ready for it. He told me he had never once let anyone close enough to matter, because closeness, in his world, was a liability. I typed everything into the system, watching the little wheel spin as it processed his answers against thousands of profiles in my database. Lumen Match has never failed a client, not once in 6 years. The algorithm finds the pattern in every person, no matter how difficult, and matches it against another pattern that fits. The wheel stopped spinning. One word appeared on my screen: incompatible. I stared at it for a long moment, certain I had made an error somewhere. I ran the numbers again. The same word came back, blunt and final, like the system itself was refusing to even try. I looked up at him, and for once in my career, I said something I had never said to a client before. Mr. Cross, I don't think you are matchable. I have run your profile twice, and both times the system tells me the same thing. You keep people at arm's length as a rule, not an accident. You measure every relationship by what it could cost you. You have built your entire life around never needing anyone. That is not a flaw I can fix with a good introduction. Honestly, you are undateable. The 2 men by the door went very still, like I had said something that might get me hurt. My own heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it across the desk. I had just told the most powerful man in the city, a man capable of ending careers and worse with a single phone call, that he was broken beyond repair. He did not raise his voice. He did not even blink. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studied me for a long moment, and said the words that changed everything. "That is exactly why I chose you." The room went quiet. I heard my own breath catch. "I have met a dozen matchmakers in this city," he continued. "Every single one of them told me what I wanted to hear. They promised me love within a week, a wife within a month, happiness guaranteed. They lied to my face because they were afraid of what I might do if I did not like the truth. You are the first person who looked at my file and told me the truth instead. That does not mean I can fix an unfixable problem," I said, though my voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I am not asking you to fix me," he said. "I am asking you to find the one person on this earth who does not need fixing to be with a man like me. Somewhere in that database of yours is a woman strong enough, smart enough, and stubborn enough to survive loving someone the system says cannot be loved. I believe you are the only person capable of finding her." I should have laughed. I should have told him that was the strangest thing anyone had ever said to me in this office. Stranger than the senator who wanted a partner who agreed with all of his opinions. Stranger than the surgeon who wanted someone who never asked questions. Instead, I felt something shift in my chest. A small crack in the professional wall I kept around every client. "Even if I agreed to try," I said carefully, "the fee for a case like yours would be significant. And I would need complete honesty from you, at every step, no half answers, no secrets you think are too dangerous for me to know." "You already have my honesty," he said. "I do not lie, Miss Bellamy. It wastes time, and I have very little of that to spare." One of the men by the door, tall with a shaved head, cleared his throat like he wanted to say something, and thought better of it. Adrian glanced at him once, and the man went silent immediately. It was a small thing, but it told me everything about the kind of control this man carried without even trying. 30 days, I said, mostly to myself, testing how the words felt in my mouth. That is not enough time to build real compatibility. Then do not build it, he said. Find it. If it already exists somewhere, 30 days is enough to bring two people into the same room. I looked back down at my screen, at the single word still glowing there, incompatible. Every instinct I had built over 6 years of this work told me to end the meeting, refund whatever deposit he offered, and never take a call from this number again. Powerful men who wanted control over love were the most dangerous kind of client, because they never accepted no as an answer, not from a system and not from a person. But there was something else underneath the danger, something I could not quite name. He had not asked me to lie to him. He had not asked me to soften the truth. In a city full of people who only wanted to hear good news, he had sat across from me and thanked me, in his own strange way, for telling him something no one had dared to say. I will need 3 weeks just to build your full profile properly, I said. Real compatibility work, not guesswork. If, at the end of that, my system still tells me you are unmatchable, I walk away, and you accept that answer without argument. Agreed, he said instantly, like he had expected this exact condition, and planned for it in advance. And you will answer every question I ask, even the ones you do not want to answer. Agreed, he said again. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked at me one last time before he turned toward the door. The 2 men fell into step behind him instantly, like shadows attached to his movement. One more thing, Miss Bellamy, he said, pausing at the door. You said I was undateable. You were the only person brave enough to say it to my face. Whatever happens over these next 30 days, I want you to know that I do not forget honesty. It is rare, and it is valuable, and I intend to remember exactly where I found it. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone in an office that suddenly felt far too quiet. I sat there for several minutes without moving, staring at the screen, at that single glowing word that refused to change no matter how many times I refreshed the search. Incompatible. And yet, something in me, something that had nothing to do with algorithms or client fees, already suspected that word was about to be proven wrong in ways I could not yet imagine. My assistant knocked lightly and stepped inside, her eyes wide. Was that really Adrian Cross? She whispered, like saying his name too loudly might summon him back. It was, I said. What did he want? I looked at the file still open on my screen, at the 30-day deadline I had just agreed to. at the impossible task sitting in front of me like a dare no one else had accepted. "He wants me to find him a wife," I said, "and I think I just agreed to try." She stared at me like I had lost my mind. Honestly, in that moment, I was not entirely sure she was wrong. I closed the file, but the image of him stayed with me long after the office emptied out for the evening. There was a version of this job where I called him back tomorrow morning and ended things cleanly, before any of it became complicated. It was the smart choice. It was the safe choice. Every rule I had ever written for myself said to take it. But I kept thinking about the way he had looked at me when I called him undateable, like the word did not wound him at all, like he had been waiting his whole life for someone to finally say it out loud. Nobody tells the truth to a man like Adrian Cross. Nobody dares, and somehow, without meaning to, I had become the first person who did. That night, walking home through streets still wet from an afternoon rain, I found myself replaying his final words over and over. "I do not forget honesty. It is rare, and it is valuable." I told myself it meant nothing, that it was simply the kind of thing powerful men said to keep people loyal to them. But some quiet part of me, the part that had chosen this strange profession in the first place, because I believed every person deserved to be truly known, could not stop wondering what kind of woman could possibly stand beside a man like that and not be swallowed whole. 30 days, I thought, staring up at the darkening sky. 30 days to prove a machine wrong, or to prove it right in a way that would end everything before it even began. The sealed file sat on my screen for a full minute before I found the courage to open it. Rosalind, my business partner, leaned over my shoulder and read the warning label out loud, like she thought I might not have noticed it myself. "Restricted access," she said. "Naomi, this is not a background check anymore. This is the kind of file that gets people in trouble just for reading it." "I need to understand who he really is," I said, "not the version the newspapers print." "You could understand plenty just by walking away," she said. "We have never taken a client this dangerous before, not even close." She was not wrong. In 6 years of running Lumen Match, our clients had been wealthy, difficult, occasionally strange, but never anything like Adrian Cross. I opened the file anyway. What I found confirmed every rumor and added several I had never heard. His family controlled the harbor district for 3 decades, moving goods through the city in ways that mixed legal shipping with things far less legal. His father built the empire through fear. Adrian had inherited it at 24, after his father was killed in what the official report called an accident, and what every other source in the file called something else entirely. There was no mention of violence attached to Adrian's own hands directly, which surprised me. Everything pointed to a man who ran his business through precision and control, rather than the chaos his father had used. People who worked for him described him as fair, if distant. People who worked against him described him as someone who never made the same mistake twice. I closed the file and sat with my hands folded on the desk for a long time, thinking about the difference between the man on paper and the man who had sat across from me 2 days earlier. Our first working session was scheduled for that Thursday, in a private meeting room I used for clients who needed discretion. He arrived exactly on time, without the 2 men who had flanked him during our first meeting. Just him, in a dark coat, carrying nothing but a folder I suspected was empty, meant only to make the meeting look ordinary to anyone watching. "No guards today," I said, unable to stop myself from noticing. "Dante is outside," he said. "He does not need to be in the room to do his job." "Is that his name? Dante?" "He would prefer you did not know that," Adrian said, and for a moment, there was something almost warm in his voice, the closest thing to humor I had heard from him yet. I started the session the way I started every deep compatibility interview, with questions that seemed harmless at first, and grew heavier as we went. What does a good morning look like for you? What is the last thing that made you laugh without meaning to? What do you do when you are afraid? Though I already suspected the answer to that one might be complicated for a man in his position. He answered all of it, carefully, honestly, in a voice that rarely changed pitch no matter what I asked. But it was the personal questions that told me the most. When I asked about his mother, his hands went still on the table, just for a second, before he continued speaking. When I asked what he wanted most from a partner, he said something I did not expect from a man who controlled half the city's shipping trade. Someone who is not afraid of me, he said. Everyone around me is afraid, in one way or another. My employees are afraid of failing me. My rivals are afraid of crossing me. Even the people who claim to love me are afraid of what happens if they stop being useful. I want someone who looks at me the way you did in your office, without fear, even when telling me something I did not want to hear. I wrote his answer down, my pen moving slower than usual, because something about the honesty in his voice made it difficult to stay purely professional. I reminded myself, silently, that this was simply data, information, to feed into a system that would find him a match, based on patterns, not on the strange warmth building in my own chest every time he spoke. Over the next 2 weeks, our sessions became a routine I found myself looking forward to more than I wanted to admit. I learned that Adrian read history books late at night, because he found comfort in patterns that had already resolved themselves, unlike the chaos of his daily life. I learned he kept a small garden on the roof of his building, tended personally, because it was the only thing in his life that grew without demanding loyalty in return. I learned that he had not taken a real vacation in 9 years, because leaving the city, even briefly, meant leaving control in someone else's hands, and he trusted almost no one enough for that. Each detail I gathered went into his profile, building a picture far more complete than the sealed file had ever managed. And each detail, I noticed uneasily, was making him feel less like a case and more like a person I genuinely wanted to understand. Celeste, a rival matchmaker who ran her agency 2 streets over, found me at a professional event during that second week, a cup of wine in her hand and a knowing look in her eyes. "I heard you took the Cross account," she said, without any greeting first. "News travels fast. In this city, everything about that man travels fast," she said. "You should know what happened to the last woman who got close to him, before he inherited everything. A girlfriend from his university years. She disappeared from his life so completely that nobody in this city will even say her name out loud anymore." "Disappeared how?" "Nobody knows," Celeste said, watching my face carefully. "That is exactly the problem, Naomi. Nobody ever knows anything about Adrian Cross that he does not want known. You are building an entire profile on a man who could erase every trace of you just as easily, if you ever became inconvenient. You make him sound like a monster," I said. "I make him sound like what he is. A man who has never once had to answer for the things he does. Power like that changes people, Naomi, whether they mean it to or not. And you are not just meeting with him for coffee. You are learning every fear he has, every weakness, every soft place underneath all that control. That is not a safe thing to know about a man like him." "Maybe he needs someone to know it," I said, and immediately regretted how defensive it sounded. Celeste studied me for a long moment, her wine glass forgotten in her hand. "Be careful," she said finally. "I am not warning you because I want your account. I am warning you because I liked you before you took it, and I would like to still be able to say that afterward." She walked away before I could answer, leaving me standing alone with a drink I no longer wanted, and a warning I could not quite shake loose from my thoughts. I told myself that Celeste dealt in gossip, that her business thrived on rumors and fear, that she had every reason to want me frightened away from a client with Adrian's resources. But I also knew that Celeste had been in this profession longer than I had, and she was rarely wrong about the people she warned others against. Her warning stayed with me long after the event ended, sitting uncomfortably alongside everything I had learned directly from him. I told myself the two things could both be true. A man could be dangerous in business and honest in his private life. A man could inherit violence without choosing to continue it. I wanted to believe that, and the wanting itself worried me more than anything Celeste had said. Our next session took place at his request, not in my meeting room, but on the rooftop garden he had mentioned, high above the harbor with a view that stretched all the way to the water. Dante drove me there in silence, and I spent the entire ride telling myself this was simply thorough research, gathering context for a client's environment, nothing more. The garden was nothing like I expected from a man in his position. Simple wooden planters held vegetables and herbs, nothing decorative or showy, everything practical and carefully tended. Adrian knelt beside one of the planters when I arrived, sleeves rolled up, hands in the soil, looking more like an ordinary man than he ever had behind his desk. "You garden yourself," I said. "No staff to do this for you. Staff can be bribed, threatened, or replaced," he said, standing and brushing the soil from his hands. This garden answers to no one but me and the weather. It is the only honest relationship I have. That is a very lonely way to describe a tomato plant. For the first time since I had met him, he laughed, a short, surprised sound that seemed to catch even him off guard. You are the first person to make a joke in this garden in longer than I can remember. We talked for 2 hours that evening, longer than any session before it. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, I stopped taking notes entirely. I told myself later that it was simply because I had already gathered enough material, but the truth, if I was honest with myself the way I insisted he be honest with me, was that I had stopped thinking of the conversation as work at all. He asked me questions too, which he had never done before. What made me choose this profession? Whether I believed love could really be measured by an algorithm, or whether some part of me still believed in things a machine could never calculate. I found myself answering more openly than I had with any client in 6 years, telling him about my own failed engagement years earlier, about how it had taught me that compatibility on paper meant nothing if two people were not honest with each other in practice. Then you understand, he said quietly, why I came to you instead of someone who would have told me pleasant lies. I have had enough pleasant lies to last several lifetimes. Before I left the rooftop, Adrian walked me to one final planter near the edge, where a small cluster of white flowers grew against the railing, out of place among the practical rows of vegetables. My mother planted the first version of these when I was 7, he said. I have replanted them every year since, in every garden I have owned. It is the one thing from my childhood I refuse to let go of. Why show me this now? I asked. You have shown me nothing personal until tonight. Because you asked me once, what a good morning looks like for me, he said. The truth is, it looks like this. Standing here, before anyone else in this city is awake, when for a few minutes, I am simply a man with dirt on his hands, and not everything else people expect me to be. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, and we stood together in silence, as the last light disappeared behind the harbor. It was the kind of silence that should have felt uncomfortable between a matchmaker and her client, and instead felt like something else entirely, something I did not yet have a name for. By the time Dante drove me home that night, I had gathered more genuine understanding of Adrian Cross than any file, sealed or otherwise, could have given me. I also understood, with a growing unease I could not ignore, that I was no longer entirely certain I wanted my algorithm to find him a match at all. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, his updated profile open in front of me, my cursor hovering over the button that would run it through the system one more time. Rosalind had left 3 messages asking how the session went, and I had not answered any of them, because I was not certain I could explain what had actually happened on that rooftop, without sounding like I had lost every ounce of professional judgment I once prided myself on. I ran the profile anyway, because it was my job, because 30 days were ticking down whether I was ready or not, and because some stubborn part of me still believed the machine might see something I could not. The wheel spun for longer than usual this time, as though even the system itself was struggling with the new information I had fed it. When it finally stopped, the result came back the same as before. Incompatible. But this time, staring at that single word on my screen at nearly midnight, I found myself questioning, for the very first time, whether the machine was actually measuring the right thing. It measured patterns, habits, the careful architecture of a person's history. It could not measure the way a dangerous man's voice softened over a garden of white flowers his mother had planted decades ago. It could not measure the particular quality of silence between 2 people who had run out of professional reasons to keep talking, and kept talking anyway. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, aware that somewhere between the sealed file and the rooftop garden, I had stopped being entirely sure which side of this case I was actually standing on. The phone call came at 6 in the morning, 3 days after the rooftop garden, and I knew from the first ring that something had gone wrong. Naomi, you need to come to the office right now, Rosalind said, her voice tight in a way I had never heard before. Someone broke in overnight. Nothing was stolen, but they left something on your desk. I drove faster than I should have, through streets still empty of morning traffic, my mind running through every possible explanation and settling on none of them. When I reached the office, Rosalind stood in the doorway of my private room, arms wrapped around herself, staring at something on my desk, like it might move if she looked away. It was a single white flower, identical to the ones in Adrian's rooftop garden, resting on top of a folded note. I picked up the note with shaking hands and read 4 words written in careful handwriting. "Drop the account. Now." "This is not from Adrian," Rosalind said immediately, reading the fear on my face. "He would never threaten you like this. Someone else did this." "Then who?" Rosalind did not answer, because neither of us needed to say it out loud. Adrian Cross had enemies, the kind of enemies who watched his every move, including who he spent his evenings with. Whoever left that flower had followed me, or followed him, closely enough to know about the garden, closely enough to leave a message meant to terrify rather than simply warn. I called Adrian before I even finished processing what had happened. He answered on the first ring, and something in my voice must have told him everything, because his tone shifted instantly from businesslike to something sharper, more urgent. "Do not leave the office," he said. "Dante is already on his way." "Adrian, what is happening? Who would do this?" "I will explain everything when I arrive," he said. "Naomi, listen to me carefully. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but Dante or myself." I had never heard him use my first name before that moment. Somehow, hearing it changed the entire weight of the conversation, turned this from a professional emergency into something far more personal, something neither of us could pretend was simply business any longer. Dante arrived within 15 minutes, and Adrian himself walked through the door not long after, his usual composure replaced by something colder, more focused, the expression of a man calculating threats rather than simply reacting to them. He picked up the flower and the note, studying both for a long moment before speaking. "The Marchetti family," he said finally. "They have wanted control of the harbor routes for 2 years. I have refused every offer they made. This is their way of telling me they know how to reach the people around me." "They know about the garden," I said. "They know about me. They know everything they need to know to make a point," he said, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw something close to genuine anger cross his face. Not the controlled coldness he usually wore, but something raw underneath it. "This should never have touched you. This is my mistake to fix, not yours to fear." "It touched me the moment I walked into your world," I said. "You cannot pretend I am separate from this now." Rosalind stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Adrian, with respect, I think it is time to consider whether continuing this account puts Naomi and this entire agency at unacceptable risk. We built Lumen Match on trust and safety. If that is compromised, we have nothing left to offer any client." I expected Adrian to argue, to insist on continuing, regardless of what it cost the people around him. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment, looking at me rather than Rosalind, as though the decision belonged to me rather than to him. "She is right," he said finally. "If you want to end this account today, I will accept that. I will also ensure that whatever threat exists against you and this agency is removed permanently, regardless of what happens between us professionally. You did not ask to be part of my world, and I will not force you to remain in it against your will." The office was silent except for the distant sound of traffic outside. Rosalind watched me carefully, waiting. Dante stood near the door, unreadable as always. And Adrian simply watched me with an expression I had never seen on him before, something close to genuine uncertainty, as though for the first time since I had met him, he was not entirely sure what I would decide. I thought about everything Celeste had warned me. I thought about the sealed file, about a girlfriend from years earlier who had disappeared so completely that no one dared say her name. I thought about every rule I had built for myself over 6 years in this profession, rules meant to protect me from exactly this kind of situation. And then I thought about the rooftop garden, about white flowers planted by a mother long gone, about a man who gardened alone before sunrise because it was the only relationship in his life that answered to no one but himself. I thought about the honesty he had given me, unasked, in a profession built almost entirely on convenient lies. "I am not walking away," I said, and I felt Rosalind's sharp intake of breath beside me. "But I need to understand exactly what kind of danger I am agreeing to, before I decide how far I am willing to go." Adrian nodded slowly, as though he had expected this answer, and respected it more than he would have respected simple fear. Then I will tell you everything, he said, starting with what happened to make the Marchetti family this desperate. He explained, over the next hour, the full history between his family and the Marchettis, a rivalry that predated his own involvement by decades, rooted in territory disputes that had turned violent long before he inherited control. He explained that his refusal to hand over harbor access was not simple stubbornness, but a genuine belief that the Marchettis would use those routes for operations far more dangerous than anything his own business touched. He explained, carefully and without excuse, the parts of his own history that were not clean, the decisions he had made as a young man, taking control of an empire he never asked for, decisions he was not proud of, but would not pretend had not happened. It was the most honest conversation I had ever had with anyone, client or otherwise, and by the end of it, I understood something important. Adrian Cross was not a good man in any simple sense of the word, but he was an honest one, in a world built almost entirely on lies, and that honesty had cost him more than most people would ever understand. "Why tell me all of this?" I asked when he finished. "You could have kept me at a comfortable distance, given me only what I needed to build a match profile." "Because you already told me once that I was undateable," he said. "I have thought about that word more than I expected to these past weeks. If there is any chance of proving it wrong, it has to start with you knowing exactly what you would be choosing, not a version of me edited for your comfort." Over the following days, security around the office tightened considerably. Dante arranged additional protection without being asked twice, and Adrian personally reviewed every possible entry point into the building, treating the threat to Lumen Match with the same seriousness he clearly gave his own operations. Rosalind remained uneasy, watching every new security measure with visible tension, but she did not ask me again to end the account. Our sessions continued, though they changed in tone after that morning. Adrian stopped requesting the formal compatibility interviews entirely, and started simply talking to me, about his day, about decisions weighing on him, about small frustrations that had nothing to do with matchmaking at all. I found myself doing the same, telling him things I had never told a client, about my own fears running an agency built on other people's happiness, while quietly wondering if I would ever find any for myself. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the flower had appeared on my desk, Dante pulled me aside as I was leaving the office, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. "He has never done this before," Dante said, without preamble. "Personal protection, explaining himself to someone outside the family, showing anyone the garden. I have worked for him for 11 years, Miss Bellamy, and I have never seen him treat anyone the way he treats you." "What are you trying to tell me?" I asked, though some part of me already suspected the answer. "I am telling you to be careful," Dante said. "Not because he is dangerous to you, because you matter to him more than he has let himself admit, even to himself, and men like Adrian do not know how to lose things gracefully. If you are not certain about this, end it now, cleanly, before it becomes something neither of you can walk away from." His warning stayed with me the entire drive home, echoing uncomfortably alongside Celeste's earlier caution and Rosalind's continued unease. Every reasonable voice in my life was telling me the same thing, in different words. Step back. Protect yourself. This is not a safe thing to want. And yet, sitting in my apartment that night, staring at my phone and the message Adrian had sent an hour earlier, simply asking how my evening had gone, I found myself smiling in a way that had nothing to do with professional obligation, and everything to do with something I was no longer able to pretend was purely business. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another one, and finally sent something simple and honest, the same thing I had asked of him from the very beginning. "My evening is better now that you asked." His reply came within seconds. "Mine as well." I set the phone down and sat in the quiet of my apartment, aware that somewhere over these past weeks, the line between matchmaker and client had blurred so completely that I could no longer locate exactly where it had disappeared. I had built my entire career on the belief that compatibility could be measured, calculated, proven through data and pattern, and yet, here I was, feeling something the system had labeled impossible, with growing certainty, every single day. 3 days before that final session, a woman I did not recognize approached me outside a coffee shop near my office, waiting until I was alone before she spoke. "Miss Bellamy," she said, her voice pleasant in a way that immediately put me on guard. My name is not important. What is important is that you understand your position more clearly than you currently do. I do not know you, I said, stepping back slightly. No, but I know a great deal about you, she said. I know your agency has never failed a client in 6 years. I know you built that reputation on discretion and safety, two things that are about to become very difficult for you to guarantee, unless you make a wiser choice than the one you are currently making. Are you threatening me? I am informing you, she said, that the Marchetti family does not make idle gestures. The flower on your desk was a courtesy. We do not always extend courtesies twice. Adrian Cross has made his choices, and those choices have consequences that extend to everyone who stands near him. You are still, technically, an outsider to this conflict. That status can change very quickly, and not in your favor. I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced my voice to remain steady, refusing to let this woman see exactly how frightened I was. If you wanted to threaten me seriously, you would not be doing it in broad daylight outside a coffee shop. Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps, or grudging respect. You are braver than the report suggested, she said. That will either serve you well, or it will not serve you at all, depending on choices you have not yet made. Consider this conversation a final courtesy, Miss Bellamy. Step back from the Cross account. Return to matching lonely executives and forgotten heiresses. That world is safe for you. This one is not. She walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to delivering messages, and vanishing immediately afterward. I stood frozen outside the coffee shop for several minutes, my hands shaking despite my best efforts to steady them, before I finally called Dante. He arrived within 10 minutes, his expression darkening, as I described the woman, and every word she had said. That matches a description we have on file, he said grimly. Elena Marchetti's personal negotiator. She does not appear in person unless the family considers the matter serious enough to warrant direct contact. What does that mean for me? It means they are watching you closely enough to know your daily routine, Dante said. It means Adrian needs to hear about this immediately, and it means additional security is no longer optional, whether you want it or not. Adrian's reaction, when Dante relayed the encounter later that evening, was unlike anything I had witnessed from him before. The careful control he maintained in every other situation cracked visibly, replaced by something close to fury, though he directed none of it at me. This ends now, he said, pacing the length of his office in a way I had never seen him do. I will not have them threatening you in broad daylight because of a conflict that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me now, I said. I made that choice, Adrian, not you. I am not asking you to protect me from consequences I walked into with my eyes open. He stopped pacing and looked at me, something raw and unguarded in his expression that I had only glimpsed once before, on the rooftop among his mother's flowers. Do you understand what you are choosing? Staying in this? He asked quietly. Every day this continues. The danger around you grows, not shrinks. I have spent my entire life protecting people by keeping them far away from exactly this kind of exposure. I do not know how to protect someone who insists on staying close instead. Then let me help you figure it out, I said, instead of deciding alone that the only kind of protection worth offering is distance. He studied me for a long moment, and something in his shoulders eased slightly, though the tension in his eyes remained. Nobody has ever said that to me before, he said. Everyone I have ever tried to protect simply accepted the distance and never questioned it. I am not everyone, I said. No, he said quietly, you certainly are not. The next morning, I opened his profile one final time before our scheduled session, staring at the word that had haunted this entire case since the very first day, incompatible. I hovered over the delete button for a long moment, some part of me wanting to erase it entirely, to stop measuring what I already suspected could not be measured at all. I did not delete it. Instead, I closed the file and drove to meet him, carrying a question I was no longer certain I wanted answered by any machine. Rosalind caught me before I left, standing in the doorway with an expression somewhere between worry and reluctant understanding. You have already decided, haven't you? She said. It was not really a question. I think I decided longer ago than I realized, I admitted. Somewhere between the garden and the flower on my desk, This stopped being a case I was managing and became something I could not walk away from, even if I wanted to. "And do you want to?" she asked. "Walk away, I mean." I thought about the woman outside the coffee shop, about Dante's warning, about every reasonable voice telling me to protect myself from a world I had never been prepared to enter. And then I thought about Adrian standing in his office, asking me to help him learn a kind of protection he had never practiced before, closeness instead of distance. "No," I said finally. "I do not want to walk away at all." Rosalind sighed, the sound carrying both worry and something close to acceptance. "Then be careful, Naomi. Whatever this becomes, be careful every single day." I promised her I would, though even as I said it, I understood that careful and certain were two very different things, and I was no longer entirely sure I could offer her both. The explosion happened 4 blocks from my office, close enough that the windows rattled, and my coffee cup slid off the desk, before I even understood what the sound had been. I ran to the window in time to see smoke rising from a warehouse I recognized instantly, one of several buildings Adrian owned along the harbor, used for storing legitimate shipping goods that kept his more visible business running smoothly. My phone rang before I could even process what I was looking at. "Naomi, do not leave the building," Adrian said, his voice tighter than I had ever heard it. "Stay exactly where you are." "What happened?" "The Marchettis just declared this is no longer a negotiation," he said. "They destroyed one of my warehouses. Nobody was inside, but the message is clear enough. They want a response, and they want it soon." My hands trembled as I lowered the phone, staring out at the smoke still curling into the afternoon sky. 6 years of matching people based on careful, calculated compatibility, and I had never once imagined my work would lead me to a window overlooking an actual explosion. My own safety suddenly tangled up in a conflict I had only recently begun to understand. Dante arrived within the hour, his expression grim in a way that told me the situation had escalated far beyond anything we had faced so far. "Adrian wants you moved to a secure location," he said. "Not the office. Somewhere the Marchettis do not know about yet." "And Rosalind? The rest of the staff?" "Already being relocated," Dante said. "This is not a request, Miss Bellamy. This is happening within the hour, whether you agree easily or not." I gathered what I needed from my desk with shaking hands, aware of how strange it felt to be packing files and personal belongings because of a threat that had grown from a matchmaking case into something resembling an actual war. Dante drove me to a townhouse on the quiet side of the city, unremarkable from the outside, heavily secured on the inside in ways I only noticed once we were through the door. Adrian arrived 2 hours later, and the moment I saw his face, I understood that whatever calm he usually maintained had been replaced entirely by something harder, more exhausted, the expression of a man carrying weight I had never fully appreciated before that day. "Nobody was hurt," he said immediately, as though reading the question on my face before I could ask it. "That is the only reason I am not currently doing something far more drastic than sitting here talking to you." "What will you do?" I asked. "Whatever is necessary to end this," he said, and something in his tone made it clear he did not intend to explain further, not because he distrusted me, but because he did not want me carrying the weight of decisions that were his alone to make. "You said once that you wanted someone who was not afraid of you," I said carefully. "I am not afraid of you, Adrian, but I am afraid of what happens if you let this conflict turn you into someone closer to your father than the man I have come to know these past weeks." He flinched slightly, the reaction small but unmistakable, and for a long moment he said nothing at all, staring instead at his own hands, as though searching them for an answer. "My father would have already ordered retaliation," he said finally. "Something proportional, something that would make the Marchettis regret this within the week. I have spent 17 years trying to run this differently, proving that control does not require the same violence he used. But every time someone threatens what matters to me, I feel exactly how easy it would be to become him." "Then do not become him," I said. "Find another way, the way you have been finding another way this entire time you have run this empire." "There may not be another way this time," he said quietly, "not one that keeps you safe quickly enough." Rosalind called that evening, her voice tight with worry she was clearly trying to control for my sake. "The news is reporting the warehouse explosion as an accident," she said. Gas leak, they are saying. Nobody outside a small circle knows the truth. Are you safe? I asked. I am fine. We all are, thanks to Dante's people, she said. Naomi, I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually think about it before you answer. Is this still worth it? Whatever is happening between you and Adrian Cross, is it worth the risk we are all suddenly living with? I looked around the unfamiliar kitchen of the secure townhouse, at the quiet efficiency of the security detail stationed just beyond the windows, at a life that had transformed almost unrecognizably in the span of a single month. I do not know how to answer that honestly, without sounding like I have lost my mind, I said. Try anyway, Rosalind said. You owe me that much, after 6 years of building this agency together. I think, I said slowly, that I have spent my entire career telling other people what real compatibility looks like, without ever experiencing it myself. And now that I finally have, I am not willing to let fear be the reason I walk away from it, even if walking away would be the safer choice. Rosalind was quiet for a long moment. That is either the bravest thing I have ever heard you say, or the most foolish, she said finally. I genuinely do not know which. Maybe it is both, I admitted. Maybe the two things have never been as separate as I used to believe. She sighed, the sound carrying equal parts exasperation and reluctant affection. Just be careful, Naomi. Whatever you decide, please be careful. I promised her I would, though the promise felt smaller than the situation actually demanded. A fragile thing set against warehouses burning and threats delivered outside coffee shops in broad daylight. The offer came the next morning, delivered without warning over breakfast, in the secure townhouse kitchen, the two of us sitting across from each other, in a silence that had become oddly comfortable, despite everything happening around us. I want you to consider something, Adrian said, setting down his cup carefully. You could walk away from all of this today. I would arrange for you to relocate somewhere entirely outside this conflict. A new city if you wanted it. Enough resources to start over completely. No connection back to me that anyone could trace. You would be safe, permanently, and none of this would ever touch you again. I stared at him, understanding slowly what he was actually offering. Not simply an end to the case, but an erasure, a chance to disappear from his life as cleanly as if none of the past weeks had happened at all. Is that what you want? I asked. For me to disappear? No, he said immediately, the honesty in his voice unmistakable. It is the opposite of what I want, but I have spent my entire adult life protecting people by controlling every variable around them, and the only variable I cannot control right now is whether staying near me gets you killed. I am offering you the choice my mother never had, the choice every woman in my family history was never given. I am asking if you want to take it. I thought about every warning I had received over the past month, from Celeste, from Rosalind, from Dante himself. I thought about the explosion 4 blocks from my office, about the woman outside the coffee shop, about a flower left on my desk as a courtesy that could easily become something far worse. Every reasonable, rational part of my mind told me to take his offer, to disappear somewhere safe, and leave this entire chapter of my life behind like a case file closed too early. But I also thought about the rooftop garden, about white flowers grown from a childhood he refused to let go of, about a man who had shown me more honest vulnerability in a few weeks than most people showed in years of knowing each other. I thought about my own algorithm, still stubbornly labeling him incompatible, and how thoroughly wrong that single word felt every time I sat across from him now. My system was never built to measure this, I said slowly, choosing each word carefully. It measures patterns, habits, statistics pulled from thousands of other people's relationships. It cannot measure what happens when someone finally stops performing for you and simply exists in front of you instead. It cannot measure the difference between fear and choice. I am not staying because I am trapped in this, Adrian. I am staying because I choose to, every single day since that first meeting in my office. Something shifted in his expression, the careful control finally breaking into something closer to disbelief, as though he had genuinely expected me to take the offer and was struggling to process that I had not. Why? He asked quietly. After everything you have seen, after the flower, the woman outside the coffee shop, the warehouse, why would you choose to stay in something this dangerous? Because you asked me once why I chose to tell you the truth, instead of the pleasant lies every other matchmaker offered, I said. The answer is the same reason I am choosing to stay now. I do not believe honesty and safety are supposed to be opposites, Adrian. I believe the right person makes both possible, eventually, even in a life as complicated as yours. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried something I had not heard from him before, a rawness that suggested he was telling me something he had never told anyone else. I did not come to your agency simply because I needed a wife within 30 days, he said. That was true, but incomplete. I came because 6 months ago, I received information that my own life was in danger. Threats serious enough that my closest advisors insisted I needed a stable marriage, a partnership that would strengthen alliances and protect the business during a vulnerable transition. I told myself I was hiring a matchmaker for strategic reasons, but the moment you sat across from me and told me I was undateable, instead of telling me what I wanted to hear, something in me recognized what I actually wanted, which was not a strategic marriage at all. What did you actually want? I asked, though some part of me already suspected the answer. Someone who would tell me the truth even when it cost her something to say it, he said. Someone who would choose to stay near me, not because an algorithm calculated compatibility, but because she genuinely wanted to, despite every reasonable warning telling her otherwise. I did not fully understand that was what I wanted until you refused my offer just now. I felt something shift in my chest, a recognition that the past month had never truly been about finding him a match through careful calculation at all. It had been about two people slowly discovering, through honesty rather than strategy, something that no system could have predicted or arranged. Then let us finish this properly, I said, not as matchmaker and client, as two people who found something the algorithm could never have found for us. He reached across the table and took my hand, the gesture simple but carrying weight that made the moment feel larger than the danger surrounding us. The Marchettis will not stop easily, he said. Whatever happens next, it will not be simple, and it will not be entirely safe. I did not choose you because I wanted simple or safe, I said. I chose you because for the first time in 6 years of this work, I found something true enough that no amount of danger made me want to walk away from it. Outside, somewhere beyond the secure walls of the townhouse, the conflict with the Marchetti family continued building toward whatever confrontation was still ahead of us. But sitting there, his hand steady around mine, I understood that whatever came next, I would face it having already made the only choice that actually mattered, the one no algorithm could have calculated on my behalf. Later that night, after Adrian had gone to make calls I was not invited to hear, I sat alone by the townhouse window, watching the city lights flicker beyond the harbor. I thought about the girl I had been 6 years ago, building an agency on the belief that love could be reduced to careful measurement, that if you simply gathered enough data about a person, the right match would reveal itself with mathematical certainty. That girl would not have recognized the woman sitting here now, choosing danger over safety, choosing a man the system itself had rejected, choosing honesty over every rule she had once written to protect herself from exactly this kind of situation. I did not regret the choice. That surprised me most of all. Fear sat alongside it, certainly, real and constant, but underneath the fear was something steadier, something that felt less like recklessness and more like clarity. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was not managing someone else's chance at happiness from a careful, professional distance. I was standing inside my own, uncertain of the ending, but entirely certain of the choice that had brought me here. Dante appeared briefly near the doorway, checking the perimeter out of habit, and paused when he saw me still awake. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will not be easy. Do you think this can actually end well? I asked him, honestly. He considered the question longer than I expected. I have never seen him fight this carefully for anything, he said finally. That has to count for something. Then he was gone, leaving me alone again with the city lights and the quiet, steady certainty that whatever tomorrow brought, I would meet it without looking back. Elena Marchetti requested a public meeting, and the moment Adrian told me the location, I understood exactly what she intended. The gathering was set for the annual Harbor Charity Gala, an event attended by every prominent business figure in the city, including press, city officials, and enough witnesses to make any obvious act of violence impossible. It was also, I realized immediately, The perfect setting for a different kind of attack entirely. The kind that used reputation and public perception as weapons instead of explosives. She wants to humiliate you in front of the entire city, I said, reading the invitation Adrian had received that morning. Prove that she can reach you anywhere, even somewhere as protected as this. Or she wants to use you to do it, Adrian said grimly. A public confrontation with my matchmaker, someone she assumes she can pressure or embarrass into abandoning me, would accomplish exactly what months of private threats have failed to do. Then let her try, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Adrian studied me for a long moment. You do not have to attend, he said. I can go alone. Whatever she intends, I would rather face it without you standing in the middle of it. I have been standing in the middle of this since the day I told you that you were undateable, I said. I am not stepping back now, especially not because someone wants to use my absence as proof that fear won. Rosalind helped me get ready that evening, her hands steadier than mine as she fixed the clasp on a necklace I had barely noticed her lending me. You do not have to go through with this, she said quietly, watching my reflection in the mirror. Nobody would blame you for staying home tonight. I would blame myself, I said. I have spent this entire case telling Adrian that honesty and safety are not supposed to be opposites. I cannot say that and then hide the moment it actually gets tested. That is either wisdom or stubbornness, Rosalind said, echoing almost exactly what she had told me weeks earlier over the phone. I am starting to think you cannot tell the difference anymore. Maybe there was never much difference to begin with, I said, and she laughed despite the worry still visible in her eyes. The gala was held in a glass pavilion overlooking the harbor, the same water visible from the rooftop garden, where Adrian had first shown me something true about himself. I wore a deep green dress Rosalind had insisted was perfect for the occasion, though nothing about the evening felt like a celebration to me. Every guest arriving through the entrance seemed to know exactly who Adrian was, and increasingly, exactly who I had become in relation to him. Dante met us at the entrance, his eyes scanning the crowd with the same careful attention he gave every room Adrian entered, though tonight there was an added sharpness to his focus that told me he expected trouble before either of us said a word about it. Elena arrived 20 minutes ago, he said quietly. She is by the north windows, speaking with 2 members of the city council. She has been watching the entrance since she got here. Waiting for us, Adrian said, not a question. Waiting for her, Dante said, glancing at me. I do not think tonight is really about you at all, Adrian. I think it is about proving she can rattle Miss Bellamy in a way your enemies never managed with you directly. I felt my stomach tighten at that, though I forced my expression to remain calm as we moved further into the pavilion, greeting familiar faces from other clients and colleagues who had attended Lumen match events over the years. Several of them glanced curiously between Adrian and me, clearly having heard some version of the rumors already circulating through the city, though none of them said anything directly. It was the kind of polite silence that somehow felt louder than any question could have been. Elena Marchetti found us within the first hour, moving through the crowd with the same practiced ease her negotiator had shown outside the coffee shop weeks earlier. She was younger than I expected, elegant in a way that made her all the more unsettling, smiling as she approached like this was simply a friendly conversation between acquaintances. Mr. Cross, she said pleasantly, and Miss Bellamy. I have heard so much about the matchmaker who finally tamed the untouchable Adrian Cross. The whole city is talking about it. Elena, Adrian said, his voice carefully neutral. I did not expect you to attend this particular event. I would not have missed it, she said, especially once I heard the rumors that your matchmaker system labeled you incompatible with anyone at all. It seems poetic, does it not, that a man who has spent his whole life controlling every outcome around him cannot even control what a simple algorithm says about his own heart. Several nearby guests had noticed the conversation and drifted closer, drawn by the tension radiating between us despite Elena's pleasant tone. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes settling on me, waiting to see how this would unfold, and I understood with sudden clarity exactly what Elena intended. She wanted a public spectacle, a moment where either Adrian's reputation or mine would crack visibly in front of witnesses who would spread the story throughout the entire city by morning. The system did say that, I said, before Adrian could respond. My voice carried further than I intended, drawing even more attention from the surrounding crowd. It said Adrian Cross was incompatible with everyone in my database. And it was right, in a way. He was never meant to be matched by a system built on statistics and patterns, pulled from thousands of other people's relationships. How reassuring, Elena said, her smile sharpening. So the great matchmaker admits her own failure, in front of everyone. I am not finished, I said, and something in my tone made her smile falter slightly. The system failed because it measures compatibility as something that already exists, waiting to be discovered. It cannot measure the compatibility two people build deliberately, through honesty, through choosing each other again and again, despite every reasonable warning telling them not to. My algorithm called Adrian Cross undateable because it could not calculate what he and I have built these past weeks, standing in danger together instead of running from it. That is not a failure of the system, Elena. That is proof that some things were never meant to be calculated in the first place. The crowd around us had grown considerably, and I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, curiosity turning gradually into something closer to admiration. Elena's expression tightened, the pleasant mask slipping just enough to reveal genuine frustration underneath. You think a pretty speech changes anything about what he is, she said, lowering her voice slightly, though not enough to keep the nearest guests from hearing. You think honesty protects you from what happens to people who stand too close to men like him. I know exactly what happens, I said. I have received the warnings. I have seen the warehouse burn. I have had your negotiator threaten me outside a coffee shop in broad daylight. None of that changed my decision, Elena, and this public performance will not either. If you brought me here hoping I would abandon him in front of witnesses, I am sorry to disappoint you. Adrian stepped closer, his hand finding mine in a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like solidarity. Two people standing united against exactly the kind of pressure Elena had designed this evening to apply. Whatever you came here hoping to accomplish, he said, you should understand that it has already failed. I am not interested in continuing this conflict through threats against people who have nothing to do with our original dispute. If you want to negotiate harbor access properly, through legitimate channels, my door remains open. If you want to continue targeting people close to me, you should understand that I will respond with everything necessary to protect what matters to me, publicly, if that is what this has become. Elena studied us both for a long moment, the crowd around us now unmistakably watching the entire exchange. Phones lowered, but attention fully fixed on the confrontation playing out in front of them. Whatever calculation she was running behind her carefully composed expression, something in it shifted, recalculating an approach that had clearly not gone the way she intended. This is not finished, she said finally, though the certainty in her voice had noticeably thinned. But perhaps tonight was not the correct venue to finish it. She walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd much as her negotiator had disappeared outside the coffee shop weeks earlier, leaving behind a silence that gradually filled with quiet conversation among the guests who had witnessed everything. I felt my hands trembling slightly, now that the confrontation had ended, adrenaline draining away, and leaving something closer to exhaustion in its place. You did not have to say all of that, Adrian said quietly, once we had moved to a quieter corner of the pavilion. You could have simply stayed silent and let me handle her. I did not stay silent because I did not want to hide anymore, I said. Not from Elena, not from this entire city, and not from what I actually feel about you. I am tired of measuring things carefully, from a safe professional distance. I wanted everyone in that room to understand exactly what I have chosen, and why. He looked at me for a long moment, something in his expression that I had never seen before, unguarded in a way that made the noise of the gala around us fade into unimportance. 6 weeks ago, he said, you told me I was undateable, and it was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in years. Tonight, in front of half this city, you told them all why that word was never actually true. I do not know how to properly thank you for either moment. You do not need to thank me, I said. You simply need to keep being as honest with me as you were on that rooftop, and every day after. The following weeks brought changes neither of us had fully anticipated. The public confrontation at the gala, rather than damaging Adrian's reputation as Elena had hoped, seemed instead to strengthen it, painting him in the eyes of the city as a man capable of loyalty and genuine feeling, rather than simple cold calculation. Negotiations with the Marchetti family resumed through legitimate channels within days, Elena apparently recognizing that continued aggression risked far more exposure than she was prepared to accept. The warehouse was rebuilt. The security around Lumen Match gradually relaxed back toward normal, though Dante insisted certain precautions would remain permanently in place regardless of how the conflict resolved. Celeste, of all people, sent me a short message a few weeks after the gala, admitting she had heard about the confrontation from 3 separate sources and had not believed any of them until Adrian's continued visibility around the city confirmed the story herself. I met her for coffee at her request, half expecting another warning, and instead found her strangely gracious. "I was wrong to assume you would end up like the others," she said, stirring her drink slowly. "I have known Adrian Cross by reputation for years, and I never once considered that the missing piece was simply someone willing to tell him the truth instead of managing him. That is either the bravest thing I have seen in this profession or the most reckless. I am still deciding which." "You said something very similar once before," I told her, smiling despite myself. "Then perhaps I have not changed my mind so much as I have run out of reasons to keep repeating the warning," she said. "Be happy, Naomi. Genuinely. It suits you." Rosalind, watching all of this unfold with the particular satisfaction of someone who had worried herself sick over a decision now clearly proven correct, eventually admitted that she had never seen a match like this one, not in 6 years of running the agency together. "Your system still says he is incompatible," she told me one afternoon, scrolling through his profile still sitting untouched in our database. "Do you want me to update it?" I thought about the question longer than it probably deserved. "No," I said finally. "Leave it exactly as it is. I want to remember that some of the most important things I have ever found were things the algorithm could never have predicted for me. It reminds me why I built this agency around instinct and honesty in the first place, not just numbers on a screen." 3 months after that first meeting in my office, Adrian asked me to join him on the rooftop garden at sunrise, the same place where he had first shown me his mother's white flowers, and told me about the only honest relationship he had left in his life. I arrived to find the garden transformed slightly, new planters added among the familiar rows of vegetables, filled entirely with the same white flowers, multiplied many times over. "I have been busy," he said, watching my reaction carefully. "I can see that," I said, kneeling to look more closely at the newest blooms. "Why so many?" "Because for years, this garden was the only relationship in my life that did not answer to fear or obligation," he said. "I wanted to add something new to it, something that represents what I have actually found since you walked into my office and told me I was undateable. Something honest, planted deliberately, chosen rather than simply inherited." He knelt beside me, taking a small velvet box from his coat pocket that I had not noticed until that exact moment. "I know the algorithm never approved of us," he said, a small, genuine smile touching his mouth in a way I had rarely seen. "I know every reasonable measurement available says this should not have worked, that a man like me should never have found someone brave enough to tell him the truth, and stubborn enough to stay after everything that truth revealed. But I am done letting reasonable measurements decide what I deserve, Naomi. I would like to spend the rest of my life proving that word wrong, every single morning, in this garden and everywhere else." I thought back to that first morning in my office, the 2 men standing guard by the door, the file that returned a single cold word no matter how many times I refreshed it. I thought about the version of myself who had been so certain that compatibility could be reduced entirely to pattern and probability, who had never imagined that the most important match of her career would involve throwing out the very system she built her reputation on. 6 weeks had turned into 3 months, and somewhere in between, the calculated distance I had always kept from my clients had dissolved so completely that I could no longer remember exactly when it happened. I looked at him, at the man who had walked into my office demanding a wife within 30 days, and instead found something neither of us had expected to build together, honest and imperfect, and entirely unmeasured by any system designed to calculate love from a safe distance. "The algorithm was wrong about one thing," I said, taking his hand. "It said you were undateable. What it should have said is that you were simply waiting for someone willing to see past the calculation entirely." Above us, the sun rose fully over the harbor, spreading gold light across a garden built from things chosen rather than assigned, honest rather than convenient, and entirely, finally, undeniably real.